Welcome everybody. I think we're good to go to get started. So today's title and focus of the webinar is the Hitchhiker's Guide to Disaster Recovery in the Cloud. And just for a quick introduction, my name is Andy Fernandez and I'm a product marketing manager here at Zerto, but we're also joined by Zerto customers, so he can tell his story as well. And that's Richard Bailey, who's the VP of IT operations at PruittHealth. One of the things that we're going to do is just going to cover the agenda quickly around what we're going to discuss, what type of value you're going to get today, and how we're going to conclude this webinar. We're going to first talk about traditional IT and DR challenges, especially in today's era. We're going to go through some of the evaluation criteria, specifically around choosing from disaster recovery on premises to cloud, but also looking at how many cloud options you have, right? Whether that's infrastructure as a service and IaaS, DRaaS, or even VMware on public cloud. After that, Richard will showcase his customer story of how he used Zerto to take DR operations to Azure. And then we'll look at what Zerto does specifically, what's special about Zerto and the Zerto IT Resilience platform from a technological perspective, but also its economic impact, and we'll conclude with questions. So feel free to use the chat room for any questions that you have, and we'll answer them towards the end. So let's get started. As we go through today, I know we've all been through a lot of changes and we're living in very interesting times. But if you compare your IT goals, your challenges, and things that you had to accomplish within your organization from last year to today, there's a lot of very different things going on. But the one common factor is the fact that organizations, customers, employees, your end users, and even your partners are all continuing to expect 24/7 availability. They want access to their services, to their data at all times. So the focus is still to reduce downtime, unplanned and planned, but also reduce data loss. Now, there's a lot of challenges associated with that, but you're also dealing with a lot of new expectations today, right? You're dealing with a new influx of supporting remote work and all of the tools and resources that your organization needs to remain productive, especially at home. You still need to maintain a focus on cybersecurity, especially as you see a lot of opportunistic cyber criminals take advantage today. But because of supporting new resources and even remote work and even new digital growth strategies, especially as you're looking at online sales and things like that, organizations are seeing a continued data growth and sprawl even more than in the past. And apart from all of that, you have to do it met with a limited budget and limited technical personnel. So these are all challenges that we're all facing and that we have to solve for. And one of the biggest impediments to do so is downtime itself, specifically unplanned downtime and the cost of disruption to the business. Now, last year with IDC, we conducted a survey or sponsored a survey titled the State of IT Resilience. And within that, we asked over 500 organizations and IT pros of those organizations a lot of questions around their cybersecurity strategy, their DR and their backup strategy and cloud as well, and what the impact of unplanned downtime was to that organization. Now, we saw that the average cost of downtime per hour across all industries and organizational sizes was $250,000 an hour. And collectively, right, those 8 hours of downtime average per year led to $2 million in the cost of disruption. Now, this data represents an aggregate, an average. But if you look at especially very large enterprises, those numbers are much larger. So what that shows us is that today, disaster recovery and IT resilience are more important than ever. But there are specific challenges that we still have to meet and that IT organizations all over the world are dealing with. And specifically, the biggest challenges are around your workload migration, being able to train your personnel effectively, you didn't have the personnel to do so, recovery orchestration, and then cost, budget, and having the ability to migrate your data. These are the top 5 challenges with respect to disaster recovery. Now, as with other scenarios and other operations and business units, people are seeing the cloud as some sort of panacea that can solve for all of these issues as well. And most organizations have listed that they have a cloud-first strategy, right? We saw that 80% of all organizations have what we would call a cloud-first strategy. Now, they see the high-level benefits of the cloud around cost reduction, around driving growth, agility, scalability, and even innovation. But there's a very big difference between having a cloud-first strategy and being able to execute on it. And that applies to hybrid and multi-cloud as well. So with today, we're going to talk about disaster recovery specifically as a means to take that first step into the cloud and what the decision-making process should be for you to be able to do that. And that's where the really important question comes in, to cloud or not to cloud, right? You have to have the right decision, motivation, and access to data to be able to understand, is the cloud beneficial? Specifically when we're talking about taking your DR operations to the cloud. And it all starts with the right process. Now, when you're comparing costs, first you need to define the need, the timeline for that cost model. You have to be able to identify all of the areas of cost. You don't want any surprises after implementation. You need to have the right cost model built and validate that data consistently. And then you have to continue modifying as your business needs change, and then finally be able to compare it to public cloud. Even if you did one of these assessments last year, just think about today. How has COVID impacted any of those previous assessments, right? You have to look at what costs are updated. Do you have more infrastructure needs? And has there been a change in the criticality of your applications, right? Things that used to be tier 3, tier 4, and now tier 1, just because you're dealing with such a larger remote workforce. Now, when it comes to identifying those cost areas, you have to make sure to address all of them, both the direct and indirect costs as well. That includes your facility, your hardware, your IT administration, even the backup tools and appliances that you have now, and the software associated with it. But you can't ignore your secondary side as well. That's the most important piece when you're trying to understand and evaluate a cost-benefit analysis for disaster recovery in the cloud. You have to look at your appliance and maintenance costs for your DR hardware and all of the costs associated with that DR remote site, and look at and forecast what those needs are going to be through the next couple of years. Now, to accelerate this conversation a bit, when we talk to our customers, when we looked at organizations who have successfully moved to the clouds, they all had common characteristics of needs and reasons to move to a cloud, regardless whether it's disaster recovery as a service or even infrastructure as a service. And those characteristics are, they all have continued growth and sprawl of their data. They're trying to transition from a CapEx model or capital cost model to an operational pay-as-you-go model. They have some sort of a digital initiative, a digital transformation initiative that requires for them to move to the cloud. And they're still looking to meet, but most likely exceed, their performance and their SLAs around RTOs and RPOs. But they have to do it with a limited budget and limited technical resources as well. So if your organization meets some of these requirements, then it's most likely that you do have to evaluate the cloud, specifically DR to the cloud, as a viable option. But not all clouds are created equal. And there's a few scenarios and different profiles for companies that would require different sorts of cloud platforms. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at 3 of the major offerings, platforms, and opportunities for you, and look at what those profiles are. So let's start with the public cloud, right? IaaS, infrastructure as a service. Think of the big 3, Microsoft Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, and there are other additional public cloud providers as well. Now, at the end of the day, what is the core value? What are the benefits of DR and IaaS? Well, at first, it's the lowest cost model in the cloud. If you are moving to the cloud, IaaS gives you the best cost perspective. And you're also using an operational model as well. So it's an OpEx model instead of CapEx, and you're paying as you go. Once you move DR to the cloud, you're reducing or completely eliminating your maintenance costs and the labor associated, specifically around maintaining a physical secondary site or a colo site. But you also have incredible scale at your services, more resources than your organization will ever need, and they're on demand, and it's easy, and they're plug and play for you to use. But apart from scalability, there's also a huge impact on reliability, that you have a vast network of servers that are ensuring against your failure and giving you the opportunity and trust that you need within your public cloud. And ultimately, too, from a tactical perspective, it allows you to fulfill the 3-2-1 rule, specifically around a different offsite type of storage for your data. So these are the ongoing benefits of infrastructure as a service. So if you look at the organization that would be prime to move DR to IaaS, it's an organization that, first of all, you already have a BCDR strategy. You're comfortable with it. Sure, there are improvements to be made and things that you're striving for, but you perform your own testing from a DR perspective, and you're able to run disaster recovery and have the team equipped to do so. because IaaS isn't going to do it for you. You still have to have the skill to be able to use Azure or AWS or Google as a target site. But you also, as an organization, you have cost and scalability as priorities. And that operational model is perfect for folks who are looking at IaaS. And even thinking a bigger picture, right, when it comes to digital transformation, the public cloud offers an incredible breadth of tools, right, around incorporating DevOps in your enterprise application delivery, even machine learning, big data, and at some point AI as well. And these are services that you can continue to add to your scope right now. So you can start with DR to the cloud, to DR to the public cloud, but you can continue growing your capabilities there and take steps accordingly. So this is the ideal profile of a company that moves towards IaaS, and there's always different expectations as well, but these are the general characteristics. Now, this is one that is relatively newer, but very important, and that's what we would call VMware as a service or VMware on public cloud. Now, what is this actually? Well, some organizations, especially large enterprise, have a lot of added complexities in the VMware environments and applications. And some of those needs of those applications and environments aren't suited for your traditional IaaS, right? It's not suited explicitly to directly migrate them. Now there is an option, especially with public cloud vendors like Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Platform as well. You can now migrate and protect your native workloads on IaaS. But you can keep those VMware policies and configurations and run it as if you were doing so on premises. Now, this allows you to ramp up your adoption of cloud a lot quicker because you don't have to refactor or re-architect your applications when you're moving to IaaS because you're still doing it as if it were on your native workloads. But very important, you still get all of the benefits of IaaS just with the familiarity and comfort of the way you're operating your VMware environment now. So you can still get access to the scale, the reliability, the operational model, but you also get access to the additional technical capabilities that the public cloud can offer. And especially when you're talking about those specific complex applications within your VMware environment, they have specific needs. They have specific high speed and performance and low latency access needs that you can now use and run them and run those native VMware workloads on a dedicated cloud in a software defined data center. So that's really helpful, and it allows you to kind of merge both worlds and take a step forward without having to reconfigure everything you're doing with VMware now. So when you're looking at the ideal profile of a company that's choosing to use VMware as a service or VMware on public cloud, it's usually a larger enterprise that is still looking to unlock the value of public cloud, but still can't move away from VMware, specifically those very complex apps that need to be protected, that need to be supported. But you still have a digital initiative around cloud, and this is a perfect medium for those organizations to take that step with protecting and migrating BCDR workloads, but still keeping their native workloads as well. So this is a really critical piece and something that's newer for organizations that they have access to now. And finally, you also have disaster recovery as a service. This is a key, very important piece as well. And when you look at some of the reporting that we get, especially around the data that Gartner has given us, there's an interesting insight as to why organizations are moving to DRaaS. And when you look at some of the more popular reasons, right, you're looking at organizations that had very immature or even non-existent DR practices, right? They weren't testing, they weren't really able to recover, or they weren't meeting those needs. Now, some had, a significant DR practice, but they were not meeting the RTOs and RPOs that the organization required. And then you see that some organizations were looking to avoid capital costs, right? They were facing refreshes. And some even had to move towards a DRaaS model because of compliance requirements. And they just found that it was easier to offload those BCDR responsibilities into the cloud with the help of a service provider. And some of the other reasons that maybe are less popular, but still very valid, are, just as we discussed, storage refreshes, but organizations that wanted to test more, that had some type of digital transformation initiative where DRaaS made sense, and even organizations that maybe went through a very traumatic event, right? A massive outage, whether it was a ransomware attack or an actual natural disaster, whatever incident that was led to them realizing that they needed DRaaS. Now, when you think about disaster recovery as a service, right? What are the core differentiators, right? Especially when you're comparing to infrastructure as a service or even VMware on IaaS. Well, it's the fact that essentially you have a partner now. This service provider is there to help you meet your goals, whatever they are. You have dedicated resources. We have premium support and professional services who are experts in the field and can help you offload your BCDR to the level that you're comfortable with to the cloud. It's usually a very easy implementation. So onboarding is pretty seamless because it's done by the service provider. And then you also have customization. This customization helps because if you're a highly secure organization where you need to have specific compliance requirements as well, service providers will adapt to that. They'll adapt to your performance needs, to your security needs, your compliance, and even the self-service needs that you may have as well. But on the value add as well, it's still unlocking a lot of the benefits that you get from IaaS. You're simply using a disaster recovery provider. So you still get a lot of reliability, a lot of scale, and you're still checking off the 3-2-1 rule box. And ultimately, it gives you a more mature BCDR practice. You become a more resilient organization, especially if you didn't have one before, by using disaster recovery in the cloud with a service provider. So you're going to improve your RTOs and your RPOs, and you're going to be able to test more and determine how much you want to improve it as well, depending on your needs. So when we look at the ideal profile of a company that should be choosing or evaluating disaster recovery as a service, if you have very limited technical personnel, right? Maybe you have a small IT staff, you may be growing, but you can't keep up with all the changes. Or you want to be able to allocate your IT organization to revenue conducive activities versus something that is BCDR focused. But you're still looking to mature BCDR without spending too much technical resources on it. You may have high security requirements and very customizable needs as well. And you might even also need the same dedicated resources and not having to share with other folks as well. And you're looking for something that's quick and allows you to onboard very easily. So that's when, in a summary, in a nutshell, what organizations are looking for when they choose DRaaS. So one of the things that I want to do now is, we've looked at the decision-making criteria, we've looked at a few of the other options, and there's so much more to cover when it comes to that, but this is a high-level overview of that. What I want to do now is kind of introduce a customer of ours at PruittHealth, and what Richard's going to do is Richard's going to, after he introduces himself, he's going to be able to discuss, what his company does, what the decision-making process they had to go through, and how Zerto was able to help them. So with that, I want to introduce Richard Bailey, who's the VP of IT Operations. I want to thank you for your time, Richard.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Hey, hello, everyone. I'm Richard Bailey. I've been an IT professional for over 25 years and have worked with cloud computing since the mid-90s when we were moving everything out of the cloud. And then we made the move to virtualization and had moved into our virtual first strategies, and now we're moving everything back from virtual first into the cloud and a cloud first strategy. So I've been around a lot of data center migration projects, and BCDR has always been a part of that. So thanks for having me. So PruittHealth. PruittHealth is a healthcare organization that is focused on long-term care. We're regional in the Southeast. We're in 4 states. We've got multiple provider locations caring for 24,000 patients, 16,000 employees. Company's been around for over 50 years. These are challenging times for long-term care. It's been an interesting couple of months, to say the least. And we are definitely a 24/7 operation and have extremely high expectations from our healthcare providers to keep everything up and running and available at all times. So DR at PruittHealth, we had we were maintaining a co-location site for DR, doing SAN to SAN replication. essentially, the duplication of production hardware. And we were facing some significant, capital expenditures to keep up with the growth that we were having in production. When we took a look at what the staff we would have to bring on and continue to maintain kind of a complex SAN to SAN environment and the limitations that introduced, we took a hard look at DR as a service or what we could do with just infrastructure as a service in the public cloud. And so just kind of the exact same thought processes that Andy just mentioned. We landed on DR on infrastructure as a service as the right solution for PruittHealth. We had some specific infrastructure requirements in our environment where DR as a service either became cost prohibitive for those service providers to meet those requirements, or they just couldn't support those at all. So we became familiar with Zerto and this product that allows you to really have data center mobility. From a virtual environment, you can move data centers, to the public cloud, to another private cloud, from public cloud to other public cloud. So, really was an easy decision once we, peeled back the layers. So, the environment that we're working on now, we have around 300 virtual machines that we're replicating into Azure. We have around 1,000 total virtual machines on-prem, but 700 of those are target devices from a streamed image, essentially a VDI environment where we virtualize our applications across those 4 states. So, app virtualization is definitely something critical to PruittHealth. We support over 200 applications for multiple business lines. So not only long-term care, but all of the business lines that support long-term care, like pharmacy services, rehabilitation, home care, hospice, and we have our own construction company. So lots of different business needs that we support. Let's see. Yep, so all different applications, financial back office applications. So it is a complex world that we live in today. And so tools like Zerto are critical to simplifying as much as possible. So, all right. So we were in a VMware Site Recovery Manager, and we moved from Site Recovery Manager to Zerto Replication into Azure. Much easier to maintain, much simpler than having to deal with the complexities of SAN to SAN replication and oftentimes having to reconfigure a lot of the backend storage to support the replication requirements, or to adjust to changing business applications. So definitely a much better approach from just a virtual machine to virtual machine replication at like Zerto. We were able to reduce DR testing. So we can complete a disaster recovery test definitely in a few hours, whereas it would take multiple days and multiple personnel to accomplish that in the old solution. And we don't have to maintain our co-location anymore. So the on-demand capacity that we get from a public cloud, allows us to save cost from So we don't have to replicate 1,000 virtual machines that we run on-prem. We only replicate the 300, and we're able to expand that common image that's part of those 300 virtual machines into 1,000 at failover time. So much more efficient and less to maintain.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions for Richard towards the end, if you put them towards the chat, and if they're appropriate, we'll ask Richard and he can kind of give a little bit more feedback into the real life use of Zerto. So we do appreciate it. And Richard, thank you so much for your testimony here and your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into how we make this happen. How does Zerto facilitate these decisions that you have when it comes to adopting the cloud specifically and especially for DR as well? So let's take a look at what makes the Zerto IT Resilience platform special, what we do, how do we do it, and then we'll also look at some of the economic and resource impacts as well. Now, if we were to describe in one sentence what we do, Zerto converges cloud mobility, disaster recovery, and backup solutions into a single, simple, scalable IT resilience platform. This means that with all of the use cases we describe, and especially in a software-only approach, Zerto is a true platform, meaning that when you see other organizations claim to be a platform, you're having to pay 6 or 7 different services at once and with very complex licensing. With Zerto, it's one license, one platform, and all of the capabilities included in it, just to really simplify things in your virtualized environment. Now, when I mentioned what made us special, you have to look at our replication technology. And especially when I explain this, I always like to compare with the traditional approach of snapshots. And what Zerto does very differently is instead of snapshots, we utilize replication at the hypervisor level. Meaning what we're doing there is we're using change block tracking and observing changes and creating checkpoints every 5 seconds and replicating those changes that are generated in real time. Now, if you see towards the left, we have the ZVM or the Zerto Virtual Manager, right? This is what integrates with your hypervisor management platform choice, and it's the orchestration tool and interface that you interact with, which is extremely easy to use as well. And then under that, you have the VRA or the Virtual Replication Appliance, which has built-in WAN optimization. And this is what replicates every change that is being generated in real time. Think of it as a replication engine. Now, when you look at this type of technology, especially where the replication sits at the hypervisor level, and because it's not utilizing snapshots, you don't have an impact to protecting them, right? When you think about snapshots, you have to do a daily backup just because of the impact that a full backup copy has on your production environment. And that same no impact approach applies to our testing as well. And because it's software only, you can utilize this in the environment of your choice. You're not locked into a specific vendor, locked into the cost of an appliance. And because it's software, it also makes this a very easy install. Now, going hand in hand with our replication is our journal, the mechanism in which you use to recover that data. Now, as we've discussed, Zerto really creates a stream of checkpoints that happen every 5 seconds, right? So if you were to look at that, it's very different from the backup approach where most organizations are dealing with a daily backup. Now, with every 5-second checkpoints, you now have the ability to roll back with the Zerto journal to that specific time. So let's take a look at a specific example, right? For example, what we would consider a very important and very catastrophic approach is a ransomware attack. And we consider ransomware a DR scenario. Now, let's say that you're hit with ransomware at a specific point in time, and you can identify that. And let's say that you now have identified that specific point in time. With Zerto, all you need to do is essentially roll back to the point where your data was not encrypted and you've deemed safe. Now, you can extend this capability and recover across your entire site for a DR scenario. You can recover an entire enterprise application. You can recover a single VM and even perform file level recovery. So this replication extends across all recovery scenarios and is very different from your traditional approach that uses snapshots. Now, something that's also very unique is and relatively new to what Zerto is doing and really revolutionizing the way we look at data protection is the fact that we've extended this journal not only for short-term uses, but also for the long term. In the past, when Zerto first started, that short-term retention sat on primary storage. Now we've extended that journal and created what we call an elastic journal and unlocked it to multiple storage tiers. Now you can point that journal to secondary storage. So what this does is it solves for backup use cases, right? You think your archive, your compliance, but without the negative associations of snapshots. So that's a real unique differentiator and also allows you to consolidate those solutions as well. Now we've looked at data loss, but another very important piece is how much time it actually takes you to recover your applications and to do it consistently. Well, at Zerto, we focus on delivering consistent protection and recovery, and we use it via what we call a virtual protection group. Now, virtual protection groups allow you to protect applications or application chains instead of just the individual VM. So by adding all VMs that make up a certain application to the VPG, we protect it as one cohesive entity. This means that when you recover the VPG, or think the application, to a specific point in time using the journal, all the corresponding virtual machines will be recovered to the exact same point in time. And you can set the SLAs and configure on those VPGs depending on what criticality those applications have. And you have predefined recovery settings for automation and orchestration. And that's a real differentiator, but I want to showcase what that difference looks like. So if we think about the traditional protection and recovery approach to applications, those multi-VM applications are subject to a daily backup as well. And let's assume this organization is using daily backups, which for the most part run at night. Now, for the duration of your backup job, that same application that has multiple VMs are now at a different checkpoint, meaning you have to find the common denominator checkpoint to be able to consistently recover that. That takes a very long time, especially if you think about a ransomware scenario. Now, imagine scaling this recovery or this method of recovery across all of your enterprise applications. That becomes a real issue. Now, because of the way Zerto treats its applications via the virtual protection group, you can simply recover the entire application stack at a specific checkpoint. That's a very unique differentiator. So it's not just about reducing the data loss, but also how much time it takes you to recover your data as well. And those are two of the most unique aspects of Zerto as well. Now, when it comes to your cloud environments, right, when it comes to taking BCDR to the cloud and these capabilities, it's not just for on-premise, it's also for on-cloud. And with that consistent recovery, we take it to any cloud of your choice within public or private as well. So if you think about Microsoft Azure, we have a very special design relationship with Microsoft Azure and continue to integrate it after every release of our product. And with Zerto and Azure, you have full mobility and protection to, from, or between those Azure sites with us. So you can use Azure as a DR site. You can easily migrate those workloads to, from Azure, and even utilize eventually VMware as a service model on Azure as well. And even in case you have some type of mandatory end of support migration, right, for your Windows and SQL 2008, you can still use Zerto to solve for that as well. And as you can see, as we've already described our architecture, with Zerto, you can replicate to Azure and deploy what we call a ZCA, or Zerto Cloud Appliance, which includes the Zerto Virtual Manager and the VRA, or the replication engine. And you can store that replicated data using cost-effective blob storage. So that's where you unlock the value of IaaS with the low-cost blob storage. And the same thing applies to AWS. And the only difference that it's not blob storage, it's S3. And with S3 storage, you also achieve the same impact. And our focus is to have the same consistent use, the same consistent performance across these clouds as well. And what we've done recently is announce our future support for VMware on Google Cloud as well. And this summer, Google is releasing what they called originally the Google VMware Engine. Just think of it as VMware on Google Cloud. And you ultimately, it looks like exactly the same Zerto architecture that you had on-premise with your native VMware workloads, and you're still replicating towards that target site. And ultimately, if you do favor the disaster recovery as a service model, it's still the same approach, the same replication, the same technology that's using a target site. And when you're considering DRaaS, especially if you're looking for a mature BCDR offering and having a partner help you with that, when you look at Zerto and when you look at its impact on the Zerto Magic Quadrant or on the Forrester Wave, we're powering 9 out of 10 DRaaS providers in the Magic Quadrant and 10 out of 10 within the Forrester Wave as well. But ultimately, the whole point, as Richard already discussed as well, is it doesn't matter what your target site is with Zerto. Whether you're looking to remain on-premise because it makes more sense for you, but you've identified that IaaS or DRaaS or even VMware as a service makes more sense for your organization, Zerto will support that. Zerto is not tied to a vendor. And even as you continue to advance and mature your cloud practice and develop a multi-cloud model, Zerto does not change and still helps you enable that as well. Now, this is all very important to be managed in one place. And with Zerto, everything is managed through one simple interface and experience, regardless of where those workloads sit. And ultimately, you need complete visibility into the performance, into the resource and the usage that you have. So we offer Zerto Analytics already built into the platform and browser-based so that you can access your environment's performance wherever you are. And that's a really true, interesting differentiator of Zerto Analytics, that it is built into the platform and we don't charge extra for it. And because it is SaaS delivered, we also are continuing to innovating new features and capabilities every couple of weeks and months. And one of the things that has delivered a lot of value for users within Zerto Analytics is what we call the resource planner. And let's say that you're either a Zerto customer already on premise, or you're evaluating Zerto. With the resource planner, you can essentially understand and forecast exactly what your infrastructure needs are going to be if you were to move, for example, to Microsoft Azure. So you can predict your WAN needs, from a storage perspective, your journal and your recovery disk size, your average IOPS, throughput, and even drive down to VM level statistics. So this is a really important piece that could even fit in when you're performing an assessment, even before you've decided whether to go to IaaS or DRaaS. This will help you understand from a resource perspective exactly what you need. So that really concludes what the Zerto IT Resilience Platform is and the unique capabilities that it's offered. We pride ourselves in making sure that you can use Zerto for all recovery scenarios. So we do deliver the ability for you to perform your DR, perform your operational recovery and your long-term retention. So you can think of that as traditional data protection, but doing so in a hybrid and multi-cloud environment with additional operational services. And this is all on a foundation of what makes us unique, which is our continuous data protection and our orchestration and automation that just makes Zerto an easy button for these operations. Now, we've taken a look at the technology, but another very important piece is, a lot of organizations move DR to the cloud because of its economic impact, but it also helps to have a platform and a solution that helps you do that and also delivers its own economic impact. And Zerto delivers ROI very uniquely. So if you look at across all of our use cases that we've delivered, we help organizations replace multiple point solutions and save a ton of money directly and across the long run as well. Because of our ability to help you eliminate secondary sites, you can see savings across years in your operations. And we help you with improved operational efficiency, reducing the amount of time, the amount of resource and attention it takes to support these processes. And also the obvious one, avoiding the cost of downtime, especially if you're a 24/7 organization. And even if you're looking at things like planned downtime and you're approaching a merger and acquisition, with Zerto, you can merge your data centers as well and optimize your infrastructure to reduce costs. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you before we conclude is a very interesting assessment conducted by Forrester, and it's the total economic impact of Zerto. And there's a lot of value there, but I wanted to hone in specifically just on DR because it's the focus of today. And we've talked about a reduction in the tools and everything, but prior to using Zerto, organizations saw what we would call, the full-time equivalent, or the FTE, which is around 2,080 hours a year, right? So if you look at that last point at the end, using Zerto, the organizations were able to save 2.4 FTEs in productivity each year for a savings of $204,000. So apart from the benefit and the value and the operational models that you'll pursue within the cloud, you still want to be able to drive an economic impact with the solutions that you use. So I urge you to check out this report online. It's available for free to download, and it's called the Total Economic Impact of the Zerto IT Resilience Platform, and it was conducted by Zerto. And as a final call to action, I want you to get started today, especially, regardless of what point you are in your evaluation criteria for cloud. We offer an Azure TCO calculator that allows you to be able to take a look into exactly what that cost looks like if you were to move BCDR to the cloud. And if you're already a customer or even very interested as a prospect in looking at what our environment looks like when you're using Azure as a target site, you can also access our hands-on labs at the link below. So with that, I want to conclude today's presentation. I want to thank you all for your time, and we can move over to the Q&A section now as well. So let me just open up the chat and take a look at some of the most important questions as well. So if you just give me a minute, we'll review those. Let me maximize the screen. One of the most important questions we always get is exactly how does Zerto license this product? Well, it does it from a VM perspective. So we license per VM. And another one, let's see. And yes, so one of the other main questions that we get too is, as we've discussed, we support Microsoft Azure, we support AWS, and we've announced future support for the Google on VMware Cloud Edition as well. And those are really key important aspects as well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it another minute to see an additional questions. If you don't get any of your questions asked today, I'll make sure to personally answer those questions and email you as well. So I'm just going to give it one more minute, and then from there we'll move forward and answer all your questions. And I do want to state that the recording for today is going to be sent to you, so you have access to kind of look back at the recording and the slides as a resource, and I'll make sure to answer your questions. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time. I want to thank Richard for his time as well and kind of giving a testimony, and I hope you all have a great week as well. So thank you.